outgrown his family. Nevertheless, his father had been his mentor and confidant for the best part of his life, so when Leopold died suddenly in May 1787, leaving most of his estate to Mozart's sister, Wolfgang was filled with grief and unresolved rage.
And what major work did he write next? A glorious confection, a fantastically fertile, daring romp of a piece. Eine kleine Nachtmusik.
I can produce better music out of my own arse.
What's he saying with it? Why is he writing such sprightly, positive music when such a significant event in his life has just occurred? Leopold, for so long the bedrock of his life, has gone, and you'd have thought it would have elicited from him some really deep and dark and penetrating work. The reality is that when you get below the surface, this sheeny veneer, there is a dark brilliance to it. Here you have something which is outwardly bright and positive. It's in the key of C major after all, a lovely, wide, open key, perhaps echoing some sense of liberation from his father. And yet not far below the surface there's a much greater sense of tenderness, of poignancy. It's elegant, yes, but boy is it sad. Perhaps the saddest music ever written by anyone in a major key. When his father dies, the music it brings out of him is full of charm and warmth. It's almost as if he's trying to say, my dad's died, but I'm okay. Of course, you look a little bit deeper in the music and you realize he's not okay at all.
Mozart had every reason to feel despondent. By 1787, his income was down to a third of what it had been during his most prosperous years in Vienna. A recession had drastically curtailed the capital's musical life.
For years, Mozart had tried to obtain a permanent position at the court of the Emperor Joseph II. His efforts had been in vain until December 1787.
When the composer Gluck, who'd occupied the post for nearly 3 decades, suddenly died, Mozart was at last appointed court composer.
So, have you found out how much the Emperor's willing to pay you?
It's a decent salary.
Well, come on, how much?
800.
And how much was Gluck paid?
2,000.
How can they say you're worth less? How dare they?
Assured me I were not to be forgotten in the future.
The future? What good can the future do us? We need money now.
This new job of his is driving him crazy. He hasn't been commissioned to do anything decent yet. He gets to do a lot of this sort of thing. I mean, nothing wrong with that, of course. But
and so the Black Thought, as he called them, continued. Yet somehow he'd managed to shake it off, put a brave face on it. You'd go round to see him, and he'd be prattling on about some new piece he'd written, some new jacket he wanted to buy, some famous billiards player just arrived in town. And all the while creating this sublime music.
This symphony, his 39th, was also written during that terrible but insanely creative summer of 1788. It's got a kind of savage brutality unlike anything we've ever seen in Mozart before. The very opening adagio has got this really almost ugly, pugnacious quality to it, with a huge motor driving it. And these downward and upward turning scales in the violins. Stark timpani writing, the drum writing. It's just driving us to the next jarring forte.
No one can doubt his genius, but he was always in ferment. His ideas were too frequently in a state of flux.
Just look at the symphonies. For all their pomp and fire and brilliance, they lack that sense of unity, that clarity and directness of presentation.
Which we rightly admire in the works of, for example, Mr. Haydn.
Noble simplicity, what's wrong with that?
Yes, Herr Mozart has a decided leaning towards the difficult and unusual.
Perhaps one might say his music was too highly seasoned.
And whose palate can endure that for long?